They say that good things come in small packages, and whilst no variant of the new Land Rover Defender is a small car, the Defender 90 is at least the smallest. And with two options available, with the longer wheelbase 110 that we already know and already love, can the 90 match up to its bigger brother? The shorter wheelbase Land Rover Defender 90 is going to be the true yardstick to find out whether the rebirth of this icon has truly been successful. Because the shorter wheelbase obviously harks back to the older series Land Rover, and then of course the 90 Defenders that came along later. And it's these shorter wheelbase vehicles that were the real workhorses and the things that really were taken into people's hearts as Defender enthusiasts. So whilst the long wheelbase car serves its purpose in terms of practicality, the short wheelbase car must stand on merits beyond being able to fit more stuff in the back. Generally speaking, this vehicle carries over the design from the 110. It's got its nice squared off stance with chamfered edges and bulging wheel arches to ensure that it retains that Defender character. I'd say the 90s probably have a more prominent shoulder line with this piece of bodywork going on uninterrupted to the rear, amplified by the larger section of glass here as well. And whilst it is safe to assume that off-road enthusiasts will be pining for steel wheels on this car, this is a top-spec Defender X. That means it gets larger 19-inch alloy wheels, which are maybe a bit more showy for those times when you turn up to dinner, albeit caked with mud all the same. The thing that really does give this car its short, stout proportions is the fact that the wheelbase is 435mm shorter. Now this Land Rover Defender is the P400, and that means under the bonnet is a 3-litre 6-cylinder engine that's supplemented by a mild hybrid system. Now how much difference does that make? Well, this gets a little better economy than the P300 model, which is a 4-cylinder 2-litre engine, but this packs nearly 100 horsepower more. 395 brake horsepower and 550 newton meters of torque means that whilst this is a big vehicle, it does get its skates on. 0 to 62 miles per hour is done and dusted in 6 seconds, and it has a top speed of 130 miles per hour, which is probably about as fast as you want to go in something as big and purposeful as a Defender. While power figures are vanity, torque is sanity when it comes to 4x4s, and that's even true whenever you're pottering about around town, because it's that mechanical grunt that will get you out of a junction. 550 newton meters is not inconsequential. Now, just like the 110, the 90 retains that big, tall driving stature that you have, that real king of the road feel as you tower over things even as tall as a Range Rover Velar. But obviously the 90 has that shorter wheelbase, and that means that it's actually a little bit more manoeuvrable at high and low speeds. It's certainly easier to park without that added length, but actually this works to its advantage on faster roads also. Now, I wouldn't say the P400, despite the grunt that is under the bonnet, is a vehicle that encourages you to start throwing it round country roads. There is still quite a lot of body roll, but once it does squat down on any given corner, there's plenty of grip, and the steering, whilst really lacking any feedback whatsoever, is precise, and you do have some confidence that it's going to go where you place it. Though, like I said, the body roll is probably enough to put you off. It's no sports car, this, quite obviously. Generally speaking, this powertrain's nice and refined. Engine sort of melts away into the background, and the rest of the vehicle does generate some noise. There's some road and some wind noise you'd probably expect from something of this sort of shape cutting through the wind. But actually the powertrain is very quiet, it's nice and responsive, and it's paired to all 4 wheels via this 8-speed automatic transmission, which is plenty responsive. You can trip it up a little if you suddenly command some power, but all in all it blends the gears nicely together to create a rather tranquil driving experience. Now, generally speaking, the 90s ride is plenty supple. Obviously, this vehicle being designed to take the rough and tumble of climbing a mountain, the deepest potholes of the UK are no problem whatsoever. You do get a slight rebound, a slightly oversprung motion as you go over bumps, particularly high frequency bumps at speed, slightly exaggerated by that shorter wheelbase. But I'd say it's not too much of an issue, and in the grand scheme of very capable off-roaders, the body control is much better than something like a Jeep Wrangler. But while Mother Nature is doing her worst to the exterior of the vehicle, inside, particularly on this Defender X, it is a beautiful sea of rich materials and interesting design. all of this soft touch leather, really neat stitching. It really elevates the cabin into being something a bit like, I don't know, a Barber jacket. Functional in reality, but ultimately is a luxury item, and this being the top of the line Defender and the price tag it carries, so it should be. That said, underneath a lot of these soft and plush materials are nice, hardy, durable rubbers, which means that it will deal with muddy boots and shovels being thrown into it, and all of those things that a Defender's associated with. This might be the poshest model, but it still has the bones of the workhorse car. Introduced on the new Defender is this latest PiviPro touchscreen infotainment system, and it is such a jump ahead of what JLR has had in the past. The graphics are really neat, it's easy to use, it's very responsive. Yeah, it's great, and it's teamed with this digital display for the driver as well, and the crossover between the two means that you don't have to keep looking down here for the navigation. It's available at a glance here, and this X model's heads-up display as well is also very helpful for keeping your eyes on the road. Speaking of functional technology, you'll find plenty of plugs and sockets and ports all over this car for charging modern day technology, including the boot actually, which is very handy if you need to hoover anything out after trips to the tip or muddy shovels or whatever you may throw into the back of a Defender these days. However, one of the most useful elements of this technological package that I'm finding is the interior mirror, because whilst it might appear like a regular reflective mirror, you flip this switch and it turns to a screen, giving you a crystal clear view of what's behind thanks to a camera mounted at the very back of the car. Now, whilst that might not seem too important, especially on a vehicle that's so square and generally has really good visibility forwards to the sides, but it's when you glance over your shoulder that you start to have a little bit of an issue, because you've got that big spare wheel on the back, and if you've got the headrests up the rear seats, they can obscure. With this, no issue whatsoever. I've actually got a better view than what I would do if I was looking out the back window. The interior offers plenty of space, and as you can see in this particular Defender, it's spec'd with the first row being 3 seats. And one of the best things for any parent is 3 seats in the front, because on the school run, the first thing the kids argue about is who sits in the front. Here is your answer, courtesy of Land Rover. Now, the 3 seats up the front and the 3 in the back means that this particular Defender can seat 6 in total. Granted, the middlemost seats are a little bit of a compromise, but 6 nonetheless. And that makes it only 1 seat less practical than a fully loaded 110 with 7 seats. However, while the outermost seats at the rear will happily seat adults, over longer journeys and maybe from a practicality standpoint, because this is a 3-door car, maybe a 110 would be more beneficial if you're regularly using the back seats for adults and taller children. 397 litres of boot space is accessed via that traditional side-hinged boot opening, but fold those back seats down entirely and you've got a van rivalling 1,563 litres at your disposal. This specific Defender rides on air suspension. That means it can be raised and lowered at your will. Actually, its wading depth is some 90 centimetres, and thanks to the other onboard wading sensors, there's very few streams and rivers that you'll struggle to ford. And of course, thanks to the excessive amount of customisation and option packs you can have on a Defender, you can also add a snorkel for some added capability. Recently I drove a friend's old school Land Rover Defender 90, and whilst these two cars are from polar opposite ends of a timeline, and let's be honest, the previous Defender's development probably stopped somewhere in the 80s and just got updated, there is an echo of the old car in here. There is some intangible sense that these things are blood relations. I can't quite put my finger on what it is, because I mean, clearly I've got enough room to move my elbow here, and you know, my knee's still intact, which obviously with all the hard metal surfaces and lack of ergonomics in the old car wouldn't have been the case. But there is a sense of familiarity in here. I'm not sure whether it's sort of the very squared off sense that the vehicle has. Certainly some of its mannerisms are quite similar. The slight detachment from what's going on beneath you, the feeling of sitting on top of the vehicle. There is something in here. There are ghosts of the old car lingering. And to those out there who are bemoaning that this is some sort of PR exercise or Land Rover cashing in on the Defender name, you need to understand that people who bought old school Defenders stopped buying old school Defenders a long time ago. By the end of the Defender's life, it was an expensive vehicle. It wasn't a farm workhorse anymore. those people had all gone and bought Isuzu pickup trucks. Everyone else who was left with the Defender either appreciated it as an off-roading enthusiast or loved it for its design. That's what this new car does really well, is it sort of blends those two together, adds just enough technology and comfort and convenience to use it every day, and ultimately transforms it into a new age icon that everybody can appreciate. This true rebirth of an icon was always going to have its critics, and whilst you can have one in just about every flavour imaginable, this P400 at about £80,000 is quite expensive for a Defender. True off-roading enthusiasts are obviously going to hanker for the lower spec grades with the real rough and tumble steel wheels, and they won't care for a lot of the plush and luxury that comes with an X Defender. But you know what, I think the real proof positive that this vehicle is a success is that when you drive an old school Defender, you get a little wave from existing owners. There's a little acknowledgement that you're part of the club. I was getting that same wave in this. Welcome to the family, Defender 90. Head to YesAuto.com for the latest car news and reviews, and don't forget to check us out on social media. We're in all the usual places such as Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. Simply search for YesAuto.